Yes, good morning and welcome to the Power Breakfast News Review section. Just before this session, of course, that was Kanyeki Rock Band with their lovely music. Now we move on to the next session, and this is where we look at the headlines this morning. And to help us do this, we have on my extreme left, Vincent Kimosop, a policy analyst. Next to him, Peter Kaluma, Member of Parliament from Homa Bay. On my right, Isaac Mwaura, nominated MP. And for the very first time on this panel, Boni Halwale, Senator Kakamega County. Karibu sana Mheshimiwa.
Thank you.
You can use the hashtag as we proceed with the conversation. Hashtag Power Breakfast. On Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram as well. Use the Twitter handle at Citizen TV Kenya. My Twitter handle is at Freddy Ndimuli. Of course, Mheshimiwa Halwale, your Twitter handle is at K Boni Mtetezi.
That's right.
Yes. At Mwaura Isaac 1. Yes. At Vincent.
Vicky Mosop.
At Vicky Mosop. Mheshimiwa Kaluma tells me he's yet to discover what Twitter is. So, but you're on Facebook.
I'm analog.
You're on Facebook.
No, I'm not there.
Yours is Gmail.
I'm analog.
At gmail.com. Okay. A quick look at the headlines this morning. And the Daily Nation headlines with the CJ nominee might plan to bring justice. Staunch Adventist promises to speed up hearing of cases and digitize records. In his last assignment, he said Patni judge should be sacked. Raila says judge is up to the task and candidate is set to meet MPs. On the Standard, why Maraga was chosen. JSC saw in him a unifier to bring together a divided judiciary and a man of integrity and hard work who would be easily accepted since he is an insider. Down there on the Standard, defectors to cost taxpayers 1 billion shillings in case of by-elections. We'll be discussing that a little later. On the Star, which Bwana Kimosop is looking at, and the headline is, why JSC picked Maraga for CJ. He beat 10 others in the race to replace Mutunga. Now, of course, we'll be discussing a lot more, especially in politics, and some of the things we'll be looking at today include the cost of defectors and by-elections, if at all they're called, if at all we get to that point. Of course, one of my panelists has written to Parliament seeking for defectors to be barred from Parliament buildings. We'll be discussing that a lot more. Plus, the court party. we do have one of them here, though.
Actually, two.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, we'll get to discuss that. CORD party, the proposal to register CORD as a political party, and plus the proposal to reintroduce the possible reintroduction of the Prime Minister's position as proposed by one of my panelists as well. So we'll be discussing a lot of that. Supremacy battles, we're seeing what is happening in Bomet and Embu. Then third force politics, something that I'm not seeing on any of the headlines. Babu Namwamba yesterday launched a rebranded Labour Party of Kenya, but it's nowhere. It's nowhere in the newspapers. We'll have to discuss that and a lot more. But first things first, let's discuss the issue of the Chief Justice. And of course, yesterday the Judicial Service Commission wrote to the President, and of course they say they've picked Appellate Judge David Maraga as their nominee for the position of Chief Justice. Now, of course, given that the interviews for this position were done so publicly. Yes, Bwana Boni Halwale, let's start with you. Do you think they got it right?
I want to appreciate Justice Maraga. The closest I heard of him was when we were sitting at the Joint Parliamentary Select Committee on matters of IEBC. He's the one who represented the judiciary. And I'm glad that he has been made the Chief Justice, because some of the things he suggested there, if it will be part of his agenda, then his mind is very clear on election disputes. As to whether it was fair, I tweeted 6 days ago that to my mind, following the interviews, the race was limited between Smoking Wanjala and Justice David Maraga. So they got it right.
Definitely, according to the news we had, Smoking Wanjala came in second.
Yes.
But the difference between the two was actually 10 points. Do you think the GSC got it right?
I think so, and it was very open. It was very quite involving, and I think the person of interest for me was Makau Mutua, and the way he presented himself, and the controversy around whether he recognized Uhuru Kenyatta as the president of Kenya. And I think it just went to show how sometimes the statements you may have made may be a bit costly, because I think that was not seen as a strength. It was seen as a polarizing aspect. And I really want to say that for many Kenyans, David Kenani Maraga is a surprise. He's a surprise, candidate, because he's not very well known. He's not somebody who you would say that has ruffled people. He's not been this activist judge, So it remains to be seen whether really, of course, he will be formally appointed and consequently, continue with the reform process of one great man, CJ Mutunga.
Yes, and curiously, you mentioned about Professor Makao Mutua, and on the list again, Maraga came first, Smokin Wanjala was second, and Makao Mutua was third with 72 points. And remember that he was not even in the initial shortlist. He only got to be interviewed after the court order that happens.
There's no doubt, Fred, that Professor Makao Mutua is a great brain. I think, why not for maybe sometimes, I could be wrong, but I want to suspect for political considerations, he would have been high up there. Him being number 3, I think, is an indictment of the fact that he really deserves to serve this country in whatever capacity in future.
Okay. Back to Justice David Maraga. Do you think the JSC got it right?
I think the battle was between 4 individuals. And Fred, I'll be a bit reserved because I sit in the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee of Parliament. So we'll be dealing with the approval process. But in my view, we had Judge Maraga, a person of very solid intellectual background, a person of unique firmness, a person I can say is a hard worker and incorruptible. I've known Judge Maraga since he was an advocate, somewhere in the Rift Valley. I remember as a partner of Pravin Bowry, somewhere in Nakuru. And it speaks to the language that you can be an advocate, then a high court judge, then a court of appeal, then you can go to the highest levels. So Maraga gives you so much that Mutunga lacked. So Mutunga came with ideals as an activist, as an outsider. You have somebody who has been within the judiciary, being nominated for consideration to head that judiciary. It's a beautiful thing. There are so much that have not been said about Maraga's hard work. But as an advocate anyway, I practiced before Judge Maraga, again as an advocate when he was a judge of the High Court. Remember the time Maraga was stationed in Mombasa. I can tell you the Mombasa High Court in particular, other than the time we had Judge Angawa, there was a very huge problem of case backlogs. And it was up to the time Maraga again went to Mombasa after Judge Angawa. That backlog was dealt with. There is a day I appeared before the judge, and I'm sorry to mention it, the judge collapsed. The judge collapsed, and when it was investigated, it was that the judge had no sugar in his body. The judge had been working up to very late.
About
Justice Maraga. Yes. That is a huge brain. The decisions he's made are decisions you can easily refer to across. But what Boni Aluale is telling you is that on matters election petitions, on matters family law, this is a huge personality. And that is why Judge Maraga was the one heading the Judicial Committee on Electoral Reforms. Yes. We met his team severally, again as Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, before they had the opportunity to appear before the team, the Joint Select Parliamentary Committee on an IEBC and unrelated matters where my brother Boni Aluale was. He's so steep. He's a gentleman whose political affiliation you cannot know. He's a gentleman, I can tell you, if you just want a firm decision, whether you're a friend or not, you will get it. His sense of justice is something you cannot refute. So this competition was between Judge Maraga, in my view, the Justice Professor Smokin Wanjala, who also taught me at the university, very huge, but limited against Maraga in terms of legal practice. Because you remember Smokin Wanjala came straight from the law school to the Supreme Court. So in terms of experience in dealing with actual cases, the range of matters the Supreme Court is dealing with is a bit limited. So I think in terms of experience and opportunity to manifest judgment, Maraga has had more. So Smokin Wanjala was obviously a candidate. There is a judge called Msaga Mbogoli, huge in terms of history and capacity to take the judiciary where we wanted to go. And then there was the surprise to everybody. Not a surprise for us who know him, I mean, that guy is of a solid intellectual background. Is Macau Mutua. So the battle was between the four. And I would say, as a person who would be, sitting to vet or give approval on behalf of Parliament in a committee, that I would want to see more in the papers of Maraga and the papers of the others. But I can tell the people of Kenya that this is a person we can go by for now. We can go by for now. But there is something Maraga will give you which Mutunga also did not give you. Based on his history, Mutunga left the judiciary with a lot of reforms, but largely as a correspondence CJ. CJ, who wrote very many papers, gave them in seminars, wrote very many letters. But when you search for judgments you can refer to, you don't quite find, the CJ's name. Of course, because of the limited range of the scope of duties we gave the CJ. Maraga is a judge. You will find what he says in terms of directing the philosophy of the country, more so with this new constitution on particular areas. So it's going to be a judgment-based CJ.
Well, it's unanimous so far.
It's very challenging to come in after this great, and even really somebody who's going to sit in the committee. I think from a strategic point of view, you see four things that the JSC was looking at. Number one, which is important, was a unifier in chief. The Supreme Court, when Mutunga left, you could see there was a division, either by perception that they needed a unifier in chief. Number two was also somebody who was going to inject confidence on matters elections because of the experience of 2013. Justice Maraga has been the chairperson of the Judicial Committee on Elections, so he understood the issues. So the JSC was alive to the political environment, and they needed somebody who would speak to that. The other thing also that you can see the JSC looked at is the strategic issues within the judiciary, building on the judicial transformation framework. Why do I say this? When you look at the strategic planning, there is usually the growth curve. So the first thing was the injection of a reform agenda through Justice Mutunga, which you cannot take away from Justice Mutunga. But see what happens usually when you have a reformist who has injected the confidence, the process of institutionalizing that needs to get in. And therefore you see somebody who is an insider who inside. So in strategic planning we talk about the phase of consolidation of reforms, then therefore to translate into results and meaning to the members of the public. Then finally what you see also the judiciary did was to inject internal confidence within the judiciary, because for a long time this is an institution, the politicians, the church, we've spoken about the judiciary. There was need to inject confidence by getting one of their own who actually can say truly, even inside here we have men and women of integrity. And just to agree with what Kaluma has pointed out, he's moved from the bar, went to the bench, judge of the High Court, the Court of Appeal, and then truly. And what that one does is it achieves many things, both internally and also to other stakeholders. For example, he can go to law school and speak to the students that truly, if you are a man and woman of integrity, you can rise through the ranks. The fifth thing that we see the JSC has gotten through Justice Maraga is also the whole aspect of that things that we have been central, the issues of values. Very few Kenyans will get a headline like what we have on the Standard, that he is a man of God, and then number two, that he is also a man of integrity. This is something that many Kenyans are losing. Today, I think if you can actually see, he's joined the league of the CBK governor, that there is a head of an institution whose word can be said that my word is my bond. And then also I think this is not part, but when you look at the statement by Honorable Raila Odinga, if you remember our past analysis, there were questions around the JSC when they nominated Winnie Gushu and they nominated Kipngetich Bet. Based on their political affiliations, there are already concerns like, will the process be free and fair? So for JSC to produce a product whereby Raila Odinga, who of course his history and political engagement, has given a vote of thumb, it tells you very clearly that the JSC was cognizant about the challenges and the biases they needed to address.
And how much of that, how much of politics and a consideration of Kenyan politics do you think the JSC had to go into in selecting Maraga? Or is there any?
a lot. A lot. Without it, they wouldn't have made a decision. Let me tell you, as I said, I thought the choice was between Professor Smoking and David Maraga. What swung in favor of Maraga, in my view, is not the 84% score vis-a-vis the 74 by Smoking. Two things. Smoking did very well, but he blundered at the very end when he was challenged about the presidential election petition. And he said that he wouldn't want to sit on such a bench again. Surely Kenyans look at the Supreme Court as an institution with only one function, to make a determination on who has won fairly the presidential vote. So he shot himself in the foot, Professor, and with due respect, he's my brother. The second thing that swung in favor of David Maraga was that David Maraga comes from a small community. The politics are such that the big communities are such a serious threat to the rest of communities that if, for example, the Chief Justice had been, God forbid, from Mount Kenya, the country would have said, no, you can't have you cannot have a president from Mount Kenya, the head of the legislature from Mount Kenya and the head of the judiciary from Mount Kenya. And supposing it was a Luo, factors remaining equal, the next president will either be a Luo, or a Luya, a Kamba. Again, those considerations, were guiding. So Justice Maraga was sitting very pretty. I remember the first tweet that hit me when I congratulated him was that somebody thought Maraga, his name is not very suggestive, that he was from Mount Kenya. And they were saying, look at these people. They have taken it again. Correction. The poor man is a mugus.
Came into play.
I think that's it. And we will see more of this going forward. Because Kenya has got the 5 big tribes. Kikuyu, Luo, Luya, Kamba, and Kalenjin. And I think
in terms of politics,
and also by numbers. The way the numbers. Sometimes when you see the NCSA figures, that profiling, sometimes you don't agree with it because it does not also suggest that these are actually also the sizable population, of about 70% of the population, and so therefore his nomination it actually cools the tempers because then they say, okay, well, hujapata, mimi sijapata, let's agree. So the idea of unification is critical. And also I have seen, sorry to say this because we are a tribal nation, the Kisses are extremely happy. In fact, I have seen quite a number of Facebook comments and tweets. And by the way, Kaluma has Facebook page called Peter Kaluma. So really, I think that's very good. And also, I think if you look at the profile of this gentleman, it gives hope to meritocracy, that you can actually rise even within a rather corrupt system, that people would still identify you, of good stock, and that then you can lead the country. And it also goes, I mean, Vincent and I were in a forum yesterday about certain Christian values. We would want people who actually are trusted. If like the other day I was speaking to some bank executives, and they were telling me that the problem we have now, we can't do things the way we are doing because we have a pastor. At Central Bank. So really, as an Adventist, I think we would want to see him, espousing this value system, so that there is justice. Because I can tell you, Fred, if you listen to the cries of Kenyans, there is a lot of injustice that is happening, and our court system has actually been used to circumvent that very justice, therefore, extending a lot of suffering and and the depravity of our people. So I think it's a shot in the arm, and I think we are going to see a situation where individuals, would have more confidence in the judiciary. I think it was very poignant to hear the former Chief Justice saying that corruption has actually come back to the judiciary. So we would want Maraga to sweep with a big broom, and he would also, we do not want just activism, but we would want some kind of pragmatism in the approach of things, so that then the change that we desire in the judiciary is more sustainable. Okay, and listening to the two Shimiwas here, let me play the devil's advocate. Are we saying, therefore, that there could have been a candidate who performed very well, but because of these political considerations lost out?
Certainly not. Ethnic and regional balance is a value and a consideration when you are filling, public service positions in the Constitution. It is obviously there. But I want to tell our people that it is the least consideration. In fact, if it were a consideration, then Maraga would have not been, considered to be in the Supreme Court. Because remember, from the larger Nyanza, there is Professor J.B. Ojwang already in the Supreme Court. So I would say that in as much as it is something, to be looked into, I would take it away from, having, this judge nominated. Let us not take away from his merit, by, going into, less considerations like, matters tribe and other things. Maraga, as I've said, confirms so many things. There is a thinking of Kenya that for you to rise to the very pinnacle of leadership, you must have been, in terms of being a professional, nurtured within Nairobi. This is a judge whose base was not Nairobi, somewhere in the Rift Valley. What does that tell you? Wherever you are as a Kenyan, whatever professional career you pursue, so long as you follow it with perfection, there is no limit. That is a message being sent here. This a judge I've told you has gone to the High Court, to the Court of Appeal going up. And I'm praying, because I hear a judge like Judge Lenaola chose to apply for the position of judge of the Supreme Court. We have people who are very humble down there. But I can tell you they are so deep and so solid intellectually. This is one of them. Let us not take those issues. I've been practicing, Fred, in our courts up to now. I still go to courts. And I can tell you that this judge has a very heavy obligation to deal with. And an obligation that can only be understood and dealt with well by a person who properly understands the judiciary. I started by telling you that Mutunga meant well. He was idealistic, but he was an outsider from the judiciary. So he would say we want to fight corruption. But when you go into how, judges and magistrates engage in corruption, and how the role the court staff and the lawyers play in the process, they don't understand. And now you have one judge who, for one, has been on the side of lawyers in the bar, has been, the side of, with the clerks in his law firm, with clerks working under him as a judge. You have a judge who knows when you're dealing with the matter of judicial corruption, which is a very serious thing now. In fact, I've had a case, I can tell you, Bonnie, where the court makes a forward move. Another time it is so backward, you can't, put logics and common sense to the decision, and you see what judges are doing. And this is cutting across from the High Court, Court of Appeal going up. So many decisions whose head and tail you cannot track. So this is one judge, I believe, has a better understanding. If you tell him a clerk was involved in corruption, this matter cannot be explained in terms of the law or facts, judge. There is a problem. He would see it without much ado. Something I can tell you, Mutunga was, disabled from realizing. You tell him, look at this judgment. I mean, is it sensible? How do you explain it other than that there were some extraneous influences? He can't. So let us not take away from the merit of this judge. And I've said, I'm still open because I'm going to vet. I will want to see what, made him the best among those four I believed were all qualified to lead our judiciary.
But maybe Kaluma, 1 minute, please. Kaluma, maybe we don't want to mislead the public. The vetting that is going to take place in Parliament does not give members of Parliament an opportunity to weigh in on the other candidates.
It's only this one.
It is only this one name. So even if you find that there were other factors that were attractive amongst the others, their names will not come before you. Their files will not come before you. You're just supposed to accept or disagree with the Judicial Service Commission's appointee, which to me is a very good thing, because if we had left it open, then a political expedience
as well
would now come in and frustrate the process. I'm not casting any aspersions against members of Parliament. As you know, when you appeared before the Joint Parliamentary Committee on IEBC, only 3 people stood out. They gave intellectually stimulating presentations. Surprisingly, in my judgment, you were number 1.
Thank you so
your
much.
presentation.
Thank you so
And
much.
I really respect you for that. And number two, was not even Maraga.
Yes.
I hope
Okiya was very good. And then number three was, of course, Maraga.
I hope the two of you exchanging niceties does not mean that you'll not challenge each other when it comes to that.
No, but
point.
Fred, I have to counterattack.
Yes, please. Because we need to wrap up this discussion.
You know, Fred, let us wind it up by saying the following. You know, the nation is being told that so many good Kenyans were interviewed for these positions and went forth for it. And then these so many Kenyans were graded in particular ways. And that Judge Maraga was given 84%, others got below. During parliamentary approval process, what Bonnie is not telling you will now be given the finer details. How did we reach a level where Judge Maraga is at 84?
Yes.
Break down for us this 84. And of course, you have to look at the points given each and every, consideration against what you know about Maraga, the papers that were there, and against what you know about other people. So it is not a formalistic process, as may be suggested.
Bwana Kimosop, let's find
Fred,
out.
one of the challenges of speaking among politicians and being an analyst is, this is their business. So please, I protect them.
You're doing better than us.
I wanted to, since I'm speaking, you are the decision makers and policy makers. Kaluma, I want us to point out something that I think the Constitution says very clearly. In the composition of public service, the ethnic diversity and the national image should be will be catered for. Yes. I'm quoting it verbatim.
Yes.
I think, Senator Boni, we need to come to the level whereby we celebrate our ethnic diversity. I will give you an example. The former central bank governor, Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, and also the current governor, Patrick Njoroge, truly by their second names, come from the community living in central Kenya. If you remember, at the initial stages, there were actually reservations that how comes that the central bank governor has been
Central Kenya throughout
for a long time, because there was a break.
We are not happy.
You can see already. Yes. But you can actually see that because they put meritocracy ahead of it and demonstrated by the performance of the governor, that conversation is no longer there. Yes. That actually it is possible if we positively celebrate diversity, compounded with performance and delivery, because the challenge at times with celebrating diversity and that leads to mediocrity. Look, for example, at what's happening in Moi University.
Yes.
So I think you are the people who stand in platforms that therefore we can actually start celebrating ethnic diversity, having merit, but also saying over and beyond merit, somebody needs to see that Kenya is represented, and that's why Senator Boni Halwale is already saying, by the way, we need a position of the Prime Minister, because if one community takes the presidency, another community takes the deputy president,
and they eat alone.
Please, I'm responsible to the that needs to come out very clearly.
We will be discussing that proposal in a short while. Of course, Justice David Maraga has said that one of the things he'll do is speed up cases and digitize courts to expedite the backlog, the execution of the backlog of cases in our courts. Of course, now what will happen is that the name has been given to the President. He will send it to Parliament for vetting and for eventual appointment, if at all Parliament actually ratifies that nomination. For now, I want us to wrap up that. We spent quite some time on it because it's the main headline today, and there's nothing else we could, in all the three dailies, of course, that is what features, and it's something very big to the entire country. We now take a short break. When we come back, we'll be discussing politics and a lot more.